Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Squeaky Wheel podcast. My name is Sumukha Terkanambi, and today we have an exciting episode for all of you. We are going to be talking about accessible air travel, and there was recent a movement towards more accessible air travel as Congress passed the FAA reauthorization, which includes some major improvements for accessible air travel in the last 40 years. So, to help us break it all down and to kind of talk a little bit about it and what it means for the disability community, we have Mark Fisher. He's the Director of Advocacy Engagement at the Muscular Dystrophy Association, an organization that has really been at the forefront of pushing for more accessible air travel. And so, with that, I will add him to the stage and we can get started with our discussion. Hi, Mark. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, Samuka, it's so good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I guess to just get it started, I was wondering if you wanted to just provide a little bit of an overview of what MDA does, and also if you wanted to get into how long you've been with MDA and what your specific role within the organization is.
Absolutely, absolutely. Happy to. So, the Muscular Dystrophy Association is the number one voluntary health organization in the United States for people living with muscular dystrophy, ALS, and other related neuromuscular diseases. And our mission is actually quite simple and powerful, and it's to empower the people we serve to live longer, more independent lives. We do that through a lot of ways. We have 150 care centers across the country that
Mhm.
help folks with multidisciplinary care. We have plenty of educational opportunities for the community and clinicians. We have in-person seminars. We have seminars for newly diagnosed individuals, a whole education program. We have community groups for folks to meet up with each other. We have a resource center that folks can call if they have any questions that need help with around their muscular conditions or anything. They can call our number and they can direct them to the right person. We fund medical research across the country. We have a wonderful camp program that allows younger folks to experience summer camp with other folks just like them. And then, of course, we have the advocacy department, which is where I am. And, you know, when I think of us living up to our mission of empowering the people we live to serve longer, more independent lives, advocacy to me, I'm obviously biased, is the one I think that is my most favorite because if we truly want folks to live an empowered life, we have to make sure the public policy that our decision makers are implementing is in line with that. Folks can't live empowered lives if they can't access the insurance they need. Folks can't live empowered lives if they can't get the drugs and therapies they need.
Mhm.
And folks can't live empowered lives if they can't travel and meet loved ones and experience life's riches, all the things life have to offer if they can't travel or get the education they need. So that's where advocacy comes in to make sure that public policy and the decisions that our elected officials make really empower the neuromuscular community, and that's kind of my role. So that's the role I play. I like to say that I'm not a lobbyist because I'm not, but my role is to ensure that our volunteers across the country are their own lobbyists to make sure that they can reach out and contact their member of Congress on issues that are important to them and to ensure that their voice is heard. And that's my role, is to ensure that people's voices are heard and we can get change
Mhm.
in to empower the neuromuscular community. So I've been at the Muscular Dystrophy Association for 4.5 years now, um, doing this work, loving this work, meeting wonderful people across the country, and truly making a difference. So that is a little bit about me and a little about what MDA does.
Yeah, so just to kind of continue with that, I know MDA does a lot of different advocacy initiatives. I've been a part of, for example, the Virtual Hill Day and
Hmm.
some of the community webinars that you guys do as part of the advocacy. But I was wondering if, before we get into our specific conversation today, if you wanted to spotlight any other initiatives that MDA is working on. I know, for example, that there's a new access to vote thing.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know if you could just talk a little bit about some of those other advocacy initiatives that you guys are working on.
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing that up. Advocacy We do a lot, but there's a lot to do.
Hmm.
So we'll definitely talk about air travel, of course, but we do a whole bunch of other advocacy campaigns as well to really live up to our mission. First is around access. So that's what you think of with any sort of insurance policy. So access to Medicare, Medicaid, private sector,
Hmm.
ensuring folks can access the healthcare they need. That can include telehealth, ensuring that telehealth is accessible. We really want to try to increase access and just remove barriers to healthcare. So that's a lot of campaigns we run in that. Uh, we do a lot to ensure that clinical trials are more diverse, so more people can participate in them. Really try to get, make sure public policy aligns in a way that we can get drugs to market quicker, so more people can access them. So we do a lot of work with modernizing clinical trials and ensuring the Food and Drug Administration uh, is set up in a way to ensure we can get drugs and therapies to folks who need them quicker. And we help funding medical research that help makes that happen. The third, obviously, is air travel, which we will definitely talk about, but also ensuring that our public benefits are modernized. Folks shouldn't be punished for work. So if they get that promotion or get that job or make a little extra money, that their public benefits don't suffer as a result. So we're
Hmm.
doing lots of work on that. And then this year, we're excited to unleash a new voting initiative. So we've throughout the years we've a lot of the things that we work on is and the direct result of what folks with neuromuscular conditions tell us. So we
Hmm.
really look to the community to know what we should be working on, and that drives almost everything we do. All the issues I've talked about is because we've spoken to, we have great relationships, they talk to us about what's needed, and we work together to accomplish these things. So everything we hear is directly from the community. One thing they told us is last couple election years is how hard it was to vote.
Hmm.
We've seen a lot of different voting measures gone in, a lot of different voting changes have gone in the last few years. And for folks living with disabilities, it can be more challenging. When early voting is more difficult, or where you
Hmm.
could drop your ballot becomes a little bit more difficult than it used to before, or just the general accessibility in polling places. We've heard of stories of people who want to vote who just can't because of the barriers that are in place, or they weren't sure how to vote or what their rights were for
Hmm.
them to vote. So this year we just announced it's called Access to Vote, and that's at mda.org/vote. So very simple, and folks can get information how to make a plan to vote, to ensure they can
Hmm.
access their vote, to ensure their voice is heard. Because ultimately the power is in our hands, and a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today are air travel. It's our elected officials who make this
Hmm.
happen, and they need to ensure that they hear from us. And the best way to do it is voting. So we're super excited to launch that initiative this year to hope that we can really try to get more folks to the polls, especially folks living in the neuromuscular community who might be living with a disability, because their voice is as important as ever. So thank you for bringing it up. But yeah, mda.org/vote is what we're doing there.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, now we can get into kind of the main topic
Yeah.
for today. We're obviously talking about accessible air travel, and so I just wanted to get started with kind of a question about the policies that have existed prior to this recent legislation around accessible air travel. For example, a lot of people may not know that actually aircrafts did not fall under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So I was wondering if you could just kind of set the background for people, and then we can get into kind of what are the specific challenges.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Samuka, that's a great point. And every time I bring that up, the aircraft itself or the air travel itself is not
Yeah.
covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act, people are shocked. And it's not even it's elected officials, it's folks, and
Hmm.
folks who you think would know don't, but it's because it's surprising, right? It's surprising
Yeah.
that it's not. So, actually, when the process of air travel, you actually are under the jurisdiction of three different laws. So the airport itself, so the structure of the airport,
Hmm.
um, that is under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So the building,
Hmm.
just think of the airport itself,
Yeah.
that is under ADA. TSA is a completely different law and regulation. So TSA is a complete different thing. So the security procedures you go through, that's under a different law and jurisdiction. And then the actual airplane itself, so
Mhm.
is under something called the Air Carrier Access Act, or ACAA. That is a third thing that is under. So buses and trains and all the sorts of transit folks think
Mhm.
about, most of that's covered under ADA, but
Okay.
planes itself are not. They're covered under the Air Carrier Access Act, and that was actually passed before the ADA. And at that time, when the ADA came around, folks thought, well, air travel is already covered. And unfortunately, though, ADA has evolved throughout the time, where the ACAA has not.
Mm.
So that's where you see the little division is. We need to the original laws just hasn't kept up with the time. So that's what we try to do now with what we're on now. But yeah, it's actually fascinating. I think that one stat that you said is so, or that one fact, that the
Mhm.
actual plane itself is not covered under ADA, and it's actually very surprising to a lot of people. It was surprising when I heard it as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I remember when I was at the virtual Hill Day that I was talking to the staffers of my elected representatives, and they also assumed that it was under the ADA. And then even people I know are always shocked to hear
Hmm.
that it's not covered because obviously the ADA has clearer guidelines for accessibility and things like that. So yeah, thank you for that little overview,
Yeah,
the policy. So now I want to get into the barriers. I have faced my
sure.
own fair share of the issues with accessible air travel, whether it's the people who are supposed to assist me coming late, so I'm getting transferred in front of others, which is obviously embarrassing for
Hmm.
folks. And there are definitely a lot of indignities with travel. Sometimes the flight crews are rude to people, even though the barriers that we face are not our fault. It's just how things are. Staff are not trained. So those are kind of some of the things I've experienced, and also even minor damage to my mobility devices as well. But I was wondering if you could just kind of give the viewers just a glimpse of kind of what those challenges look like for the neuromuscular disease community and for just the disability community in general.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we could be all talk a whole hour about this. Is the challenges, and I'll just say the first, flying is a nightmare for people living with disabilities,
Yeah.
or people with neuromuscular condition. I mean, folks who don't have this conditions, flying. I mean, flying is a nightmare for them.
Hmm.
It's even double nightmare for people, wheelchair users who have a disability. I mean, it is, as you said too. I think it's a nightmare, and you said it can be embarrassing, or there's the
Hmm.
dignity is
Yeah.
taken out of it, which is really really true. So, it it's it's bad. It's bad. There's
Yeah.
no way to sugarcoat that. What we've seen, and I have a list of the most common things. But it's as you said too, as you have to get out of a power wheelchair into an aisle chair
Hmm.
to get onto the plane. I mean, geez, I've seen photos of these
Yeah.
aisle chairs. They look like they were made in the 70s, or they're not there, they don't
Right.
work. Then getting transferred from that into a seat. We've had folks who have been injured in that process, broken
Hmm.
bones because they're dropped.
Wow.
Oh, it's bad.
Hmm.
And just as you said, not only just the physical thing, just the indignity of that having to happen. So
Yeah.
that's a huge barrier we've seen. And frankly, that's enough for people who just say, I don't want to fly, and no one could
Right.
blame them for that.
Hmm.
So that's a big issue as well. And then for folks who do that, there's a chance that their wheelchair will be destroyed in the process. So especially some of these power wheelchairs, which I know
Right.
you know as well as everyone else,
Hmm.
are custom made for you. They How much they cost is a lot of money. I mean,
Yeah.
shocking amounts of money how much these things cost,
Right.
because they're literally, I mean, yeah, they're custom made. And just imagine, they can be broken to a point where they're unusable. And I know I've heard this, many people say this. It's like your legs being broken if the chair is broken, and it takes a long time for it to be repaired. if that happens, sometimes it's a long back and forth with the airlines to get that done. So a crucial piece of mobility equipment that folks need to for their day to day could be destroyed because of because that piece that power wheelchair has to be in the cargo hold with all the
Hmm.
everything else that are in that cargo hold, and they have to get, you can imagine the process. It can get
Yeah.
broken, and that's huge. It's awful. And I mean, so that's a big problem is wheelchair damage. Something that folks never think about, but many folks who do fly with power wheelchairs have to think about is, can my power wheelchair even fit in the cargo hold of the plane? Just there are many aircraft in this country that cannot fit a power wheelchair in the cargo hold.
Hmm.
Your jets that your commuter jets, your smaller aircrafts, and you know this gets talked about in the FAA law, but that sort of information of will my wheelchair even fit in the cargo hold is hard to find. And we've had many folks who have shown up to the airport and they switch the aircraft on you, and next thing you know, you went from an aircraft that could hold your wheelchair to one that cannot, and now
Right.
you can't fly. And that's unbelievably frustrating. We've had, as you said before, the waiting for airport assistance. Just because you
Hmm.
request it doesn't mean it's there in a timely manner,
Right.
and folks are just sometimes just left waiting for someone to assist them on and off the aircraft, or maybe to the luggage area, and you're just waiting there. And so that's a big problem. Um, you know, Obviously, the airplanes are just too small.
Yeah.
Everyone agrees with that, but they're just too
Hmm.
small. The lavatories aren't accessible, so folks literally will purposely dehydrate themselves so they don't have to use the
Yeah.
aircraft lavatory because it's unusable. I mean, Samuka, we could I just scratched the
Yeah.
surface on this. It is a nightmare, and um, it's it's one of those things that you just wonder, how did we get to this point? So,
Yeah.
but those are some of the major things that we've that folks face.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's ridiculous how bad it is. I just kind of gave a little overview of some of the things I faced.
Mhm.
Thankfully, it hasn't gotten to the point where I've had a broken bone or anything because
Yeah,
of that. But yeah, I haven't traveled in since 2018 actually. So it's been a while since I have traveled with my disease progressing and everything.
yeah,
It's just a big concern for me to um, travel at all. So yeah, that I can definitely relate to what people are saying about that. So I wanted to ask. I know obviously all of these things are unacceptable,
yeah.
but um, what existed prior to this law that people like how would what was the grievance process like? So let's say a staff drops someone and they break a bone. What was how was the airlines going about it? What could you do to get some sort of remedy for that injustice and obviously the medical bills and things like that?
Yeah, you don't really have a private right of action to do
Okay.
that, and um, which is unfortunate. I mean, that's just you could file a complaint with the Department of Transportation, which we do encourage folks to do.
Mm-hmm.
You could still file a complaint that way. It's one of those things that, if that complaint isn't filed, then did it happen? And the answer is yes, but so you really had limited options, and you
Mm-hmm.
have limited options, unfortunately. So
Yeah.
um, you can um, you can file a complaint with the Department of Transportation, but in terms of accountability measures for that, or broken wheelchairs, or there was really limited. And
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, I wish I had more. Yeah, they're just limited of what you could do to rectify that situation, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very, very unfortunate indeed. So yeah, I just kind of want to get now. Um, so you talked a little bit about the challenges, and you kind of prefaced this a little bit at the beginning, but I want you to just kind of tell the viewers like why is this such an important issue? Obviously,
Mhm.
you mentioned like the importance of travel um, as something that everyone should have the right to enjoy. But how would you explain this issue to someone who maybe is just not aware? How would you say why is this such an important issue?
Yeah, and it's as I've been working on this for a while, I've realized it affects so many more people than you think. So one of
Yeah.
our wonderful volunteers, she said this. Her name is Madison Lawson. She said this quote that I'll never forget. She'll say that you know the you can join the disability community anytime in your life without notice. And it's true. I
Yeah.
mean, anytime you or loved one can join that community, whether you are expecting it or not.
Hmm.
And and so this issue does affect every single person. It doesn't, it definitely affects the folks that MDA serves. It's no doubt that's what drives me every day is to
Hmm.
really improve air travel for the neuromuscular community. There's no doubt about it. So that drives me, but it air travel affects every single person, no matter what community you belong to, whether you have an elderly parent, whether you have maybe you have an older sibling or
Hmm.
someone who has to use a wheelchair temporarily or any sort of limiting factor. Air travel will be nightmare if you have any of that. So this will help everybody, no matter what stage of their lives. And it's interesting that I've talked to folks who that we've been working on this. They're like, oh yeah, this is why my cousin doesn't fly anymore. This is why my uncle
Oh.
doesn't fly anymore. Even my brother-in-law, he would say, this is why my father never flew, and I had no idea. So like
Hmm.
more people know than don't about the issues folks face, but a lot unfortunately do not. They're at the airport, they're just waiting to get in that flight, hoping they can get the overhead space. Where's my kid? Is he here? Is this delayed? And trust me, there's enough folks, enough things for everyone to worry about in an
Right.
airport, an airplane. But it's important because any time in your life you could join the disability community, and it should be accessible to you no matter what. It should not Air
Yeah.
travel should be no matter who you are, what mobility you have, it should be accessible to you because your life's gonna change no matter what, and you should be able to enjoy, travel. And, as I said, the folks that we serve at MDA is what gets me going every day to have some change for this community, but it affects everybody. It affects every single person.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for just kind of explaining. Um. Yeah. I think we're gonna move on to kind of more of like the specifics of
Yeah,
a reauthorization. So I guess the first question, I think a good question to just kind of kick it off is what is the FAA reauthorization for those of the or for the viewers who don't know, what is it and why was this kind of the best avenue for MDA to get a lot of these accessibility measures in place?
yeah, it's a good question. So, FAA reauthorization is a bill that has to be passed every 5 years. And it does what it says. It
Hmm.
reauthorizes the Federal Aviation Administration to function, collect fees, all that sort of thing to function type of thing. To function the way it does now. So every 5 years, Congress has to still give it the authority to do that. If they don't, major air travel stuff disruptions can happen. So this is a must. This is a must pass
Hmm.
bill. So when you have a must pass bill, it's not uncommon for um, lawmakers to attach reforms to it that
Hmm.
deal with the subject because this has to pass. So this is morphed into basically the every 5 year mega aviation bill. And this is
Hmm.
not unusual in Congress. There's many bills like this uh, that come through every 3 or 4 or 5 years that become the mega bill. So
Hmm.
there's an agricultural bill called the Farm Bill that has to be authorized
Right.
every 5 years. So that just becomes the mega Farm Bill, right? That's very common. So this is just the mega aviation bill that has to pass every 5 years. But in saying that, it's this is the time to get anything done aviation wise. So, you know, every time we would go to the Hill and say, "Hey, we want to improve this part of air travel for the neuromuscular community or people living with disabilities," they say, "Great, we'll tackle it when FAA has to be reauthorized." So, it's a good thing in the sense that this bill had to move and it was going to deal with aviation and aviation reforms. But if you didn't get it in this 5 years, you have to wait for the next 5 years
Yeah.
essentially because Congress probably won't touch unless it's an emergency, won't touch much around air travel until the next
Hmm.
time this comes up. So that's why this was vital because we knew
Right.
that this was going to pass, and if whatever didn't get into the bill this time, we'd have to probably wait 5 years to do this again. So
Okay.
that's why there's some urgency there. That's why this is so important for us to work on, because this is our next shot in 5 years to get some of these reforms done.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So just to kind of follow up on that, so now we have kind of an overview of what the FAA does. What are, I guess, the specific highlights of the bill that relate to accessible air travel?
Yeah, and there's a lot. So I will say at first, I will not get them all because there's quite a bit. There's a lot. So this bill deals with anything, everything aviation. So I'll just try to focus on probably, I think, the things that your audience is interested
Yeah.
in. And then even with that, there'll probably be some of the things that are left out just because it's a lot. So the first
Hmm.
one is improved training for
Yeah.
airline staff and anyone who helps people with living with disabilities on and off the aircraft, and then also training for folks who handle any sort of wheelchair and mobility device. So in mandate better training. I mean, we know that as you've experienced and many folks
Hmm.
experience, the training just is probably not where it needs to be.
Yeah, definitely not.
So we really hope that this mandated improved training will reduce the amount of folks who might get dropped, or reduce the amount of folks that might just have that bad experience being
Yeah.
transferred. So that's a huge one, is better training. Um, the second one, and this is in no particular order, but the second one is it would require better data on damage to wheelchairs being sent
Hmm.
to the Department of Transportation. So, they'll have to report, airlines have to report how many wheelchairs did they break, how were they broken, and that sort of thing. And that the idea of that is just more accountability to the airline. So,
Right.
and it will be done released publicly. So if you would hope at that point that airlines will be more accountable, because that's not the best thing for them to have to
Yeah.
submit. We broke X amount of wheelchairs, so that sort of reporting is now mandated. A few other things. I'll get to wheelchair spots on planes at the very end, because that is a whole topic in itself and it
Yeah.
deserves some attention. So I haven't forgotten that one.
Okay.
The last part, another one, is evacuation standards.
Hmm.
So this is, when they uh, when they post evacuation standards, it never really took into account people living with disabilities.
Hmm.
It didn't take into account a full aircraft. It didn't take into account luggage and overhead storage.
Hmm.
So this bill mandates that they redo those evacuation tests
Yeah.
to 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 ensure that it encompasses real world scenarios. So, if there's a few folks on your plane who might have been wheelchair users, and might have been a few folks who are maybe have other mobility issues, or maybe that flight is 100% packed and there's carry-on luggage everywhere, that's a real life scenario. And we need to ensure the evacuation studies and standards reflect that. So it would ensure that those get redone and reflect real life scenarios. So that's another thing it does. Let's see, there's a lot. There's a lot it does. Let's see what else is in the Rolodex of things it does. It really mandates that whenever the Department of Transportation makes decisions or rules dealing with air travel, that folks living with disabilities are at the table.
Right.
And that's important
Hmm.
because, anything like new evacuation standards, new training standards, if folks with living with disabilities or neuromuscular conditions are not helping craft those, then
Yeah.
how good are they going to be?
Right.
So it mandates that that has to be there as well. Um, yeah, so those are like the really big things that it does. It does other stuff too with general accessibility, which I really, really like. So it will ensure that airline websites are web accessible. Make
Yeah.
sure that kiosks and anything like that is accessible as well. Because this bill will help folks maybe who have visual impairments or audio
Hmm.
impairments as well. It will, for folks who use service animals, it'll make the paperwork for service animals easier. And I know folks in their muscular community use them, but a lot of folks in this country make sure that's an easier process as well. It will uh, it will study better seating accommodations for folks living with disabilities and neuromuscular conditions. So, if you need that front seat, that bulkhead seat with a
Hmm.
little extra room, that can sometimes be
Yep.
difficult to get.
Yeah.
So it will try to improve those seating accommodations to ensure
Hmm.
everyone has a comfortable flight. So that is good. It will ensure that mandate that an on-board wheelchair is present. there's a lot of stories we've heard where they're on the plane and they need to use that onboard wheelchair to use the lavatory or get off the plane, and it's just not there or it's broken.
Wow.
So you're kind of just stuck.
Yeah.
Um, it will it will stop that practice, um, which is good. It will require better information on airline websites. So as I gave that scenario before about um, will the cargo hold fit my wheelchair? Well, that will now be public knowledge. That is good.
Okay.
So there's a
Yeah.
lot of good things. There's additional funding to make airports themselves more accessible. That's kind of blend. So that's good as well. So that's a lot. But and then there's some other things with wheelchair spots and planes that we'll get to. But it it in the end, we think it's a giant step forward to improving air travel. Is it the end of the road? Absolutely not.
hmm
We have a little bit to go still, but taken together, it's the most comprehensive set of reforms in nearly 40 years. So it's something we should be proud
Yeah.
of. It should move the ball forward for more accessible travel.
And does this include more? I remember that part of the bill also relates to complaints process and making that more
Yes,
accessible for people.
we're a good duo because I knew I would not remember something. So because there's so much, yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
it will modernize the complaint process.
Okay.
Um, It will. I mean, right now, and there's understandable frustration with folks who report a complaint to the Department of Transportation and then they don't really hear back, or they hear back really, really late. And that understandably makes folks just not want to report, right? But if
Yeah.
if the problem's not reported, did it happen, right? So
hmm
we still encourage folks to report that, and this would mandate a much more streamlined system and improve that DOT complaint process. Thank you, Samuka. Good addition there. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's part of the bill as well.
So just kind of in terms of what just the challenges of getting any bill passed.
Yeah.
What specific hurdles did MDA face and your partners face in getting some of these provisions in? If you just wanted to provide a bit of an overview of kind of some of those challenges and how those were ultimately overcome.
Definitely. So, you know, then there's always challenges because no matter what, in a big bill like this, you want to get everything you can in, and there's some things we could not that didn't make the bill, and
Yeah.
that is just a reality. But I'm so proud to say a majority of things that we wanted got into this bill, and and that's a real credit to everyone probably listening, or the MDA advocates, or advocates from the various other organizations we work with,
Mm-hmm.
veterans organizations, the other disability rights groups. I mean, it was a whole team effort. So, um, the big challenge was there was so much for us to solve, and not everything could get in the bill. But I'd be really proud to say that when the initial drafts came out, a majority of the group's collective priorities
Mm-hmm.
were in the bill, and that's a credit to the years of work. I know, Sumuka, you came to that Virtual Hill Day
Mm-hmm.
probably almost 2 years ago at this point, but we
Yeah.
were laying the groundwork at that point for this moment. We were working on this for years to this moment, and the reason so much got in is because groups, people like you and all your folks that are listening
Mm-hmm.
have been advocating this for a long time. So when the time came to draft the bill, the powers that be, the
Mm-hmm.
lawmakers had already heard from the community saying we want these things in the bill, and the work we did to convince them it was a good idea paid off at that point. If we would have started if we would have started, a year ago today and never talked to lawmakers at all about this, we just started a year ago, it would have been too late. So
Yeah.
it's the credit to to everyone who started a long time ago. So the challenge is, you know, like any bills, to ensure you have what you wanted, but the actual big challenge to get this bill passed had nothing to do with our disability rights reforms, and that's a credit to everyone who worked on this, because those provisions were, yes, they're in the bill, they're fine, everyone agrees to them, and that's a huge credit that
Yeah.
there was no controversy. The big hurdles had nothing to do with accessible air travel. The big hurdles were things about pilot training,
Mm-hmm.
um, how many planes can land at a local DC airport, some
Yeah.
consumer protection things, and I'm not downplaying those issues. They just had nothing to do with our
Yeah.
position. So the big hurdles were a little bit out of our hand. a
Mm-hmm.
bit. So it's really that's a good story that the hurdles we weren't fighting for the DOT complaint process to be improved. No, that was easy. We weren't fighting for more accountability for broken wheelchairs. No, that was already in the bill. We weren't fighting for better evacuation or better training. No, that was already in the bill because of the work everyone's been doing for the last few years. So that's actually a success story.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I know some of those things like I remember that there was potentially a government shutdown and how that would
Mhm.
affect. And I know the FAA reauthorization was delayed a few times
Yes,
just because of those outside dynamics. So
and
yeah, that
just to put that in context a bit, so when this was authorized in 2018, so the last time we had to do this, it was also delayed. So that's not unusual.
okay.
But actually, what happened last time was it was delayed, I think, over 18 months. It actually got pushed into the next Congress, which
Mm-hmm.
meant they had to start over completely from scratch and redo it. We did not have, so we were delayed, I think, nine some months. But we got it done in this Congress, which means that's a big victory, honestly. I've
Yeah.
working this for a while. If you're just delayed a few months, but the fact it got done in this Congress and we didn't have to start over next year, huge accomplishment
Yeah.
by everybody. Oh, the delays are annoying. Don't get me wrong, but like we can all breathe a sigh of relief because if this kept getting delayed, it'd been a problem. But we had it. We are very successful that we got it done this Congress, without a doubt.
So yeah, now that we kind of have an understanding of all of the legislation and how it affects the disability community, I thought we could just go a little bit into sort of the advocacy. I know you mentioned that advocates were a big reason why
Yes.
this got pushed, and I wanted to so when I have been seeing news about this, accessible air travel and FAA reauthorization, really two advocates that I've seen a lot of are Madison Lawson and Mindy Henderson. So I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about what. So they shared their very powerful
Mhm.
story about the indignities of air travel and things like that. How much of a difference did that make? And I guess yeah, if you could just talk a little bit about their contribution to
Yeah,
this.
and I'm happy to. Before I begin, I just, every advocate had a role in
Right.
this.
Yep.
I know you've had a role in this.
Hmm.
Everyone have shared their story, and many people did it on camera. So, every single person who took action, no matter what group you're from, whether or maybe you just on your own, you had a difference. So, the reason we got this through. Was because of the collective action of every
Yeah.
single person. So I just want to put that out there. But there's no doubt that two folks at MDA had the privilege to work with really moved the ball. So
Hmm.
um, we had Madison Lawson, who is an all-star advocate. She's a model and activist, influencer, and then we had Mindy Henderson, who is actually our.
Hmm.
She works with at MDA. She's editor in chief of Quest magazine. She's a huge vice president role. Two huge rock stars. I like to say I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, but I want to be one of them because they are just two phenomenal women. And we knew for this time around that obviously sharing your story about what happens on an airplane is very powerful, but it's one thing to share, there's another thing to show.
Right.
So we thought, why don't we film the experience that someone that we know a lot of folks have, but don't see? Because I always remembered when I was getting ready to board an aircraft, and you would hear the announcement that folks who might need extra time or in wheelchairs may board now. And understand that most people aren't paying attention, right? They are on their phone, they're saying goodbye to their husband for the last time, and I understand
Hmm.
that, but folks don't know exactly what happens when that happens. So let's show that process. So
Hmm.
we did. We filmed the process from start to finish. It the what it takes to get to the airport through security, on and off the aircraft, what wheelchair damage, unfortunately, and all as you said, the real indignity of it. We just showed it. So we filmed them, made them into videos, and that really, I mean, that really, we were working on this for a while, but that really was kind of the rocket fuel when we showed those. We showed them the press, showed them the lawmakers, and it really not only did it get folks who weren't didn't know what happened. Like, oh wow. I mean, I remember I showed this to my parents and they were shocked. They had no idea, and that really was a great education piece, but it also allowed other folks to share their stories too. And we
Mm-hmm.
saw so many folks like, "Hey, that happened to me too. I want to take action along with you." And we got lots of people to join us and take actions and share their story as well. So, as it is, that story aspect was incredibly crucial. When we had folks come to the Hill Day, they literally just had to recount what it took for them to come to DC and
Yeah.
express their constitutional right to petition
Right.
their government. That's all they had to do. And it was the most powerful meetings I've ever been along with, because you could say, "This is what it took me to see you today. That my
Mm-hmm.
wheelchair is damaged right now, and that's what it took me to see you today." It is
Wow.
so powerful. And so, advocacy stories really is what drove the success, and so many folks had them and were willing to share them. What we're able to do with both Mindy and Madison, were just, credit to them. Those two really true rock stars, of that public facing campaign. And if you haven't seen the videos, they're on MDA's YouTube channel.
Okay.
Please take a look at them. And I'm hoping as we go along, we'll have more that, like, before and after, right? This is what happened,
Yeah.
we can show the changes, because I
Mm-hmm.
truly believe they're coming. But the role of folks like those two women to share their stories were just, you can't put into words. And as I said before, and every other advocate who did that as
Mm-hmm.
well, because they were not the only two.
Yeah, so just in terms of like the community, I've mentioned already that I had the privilege of being part of the virtual Hill Day.
Yeah.
What are other ways that advocates got involved? I know, like writing letters, calling. I just wondered if you could just kind of provide some numbers about just how much effort it took to get this through.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and the nice thing about this, it was collective effort. MDA definitely took a huge, huge part of it, but we worked with the veterans groups. We worked with
Hmm.
other groups in the neuromuscular space. We worked with a ton of other organizations, and we should do a collective number and see. But at least from MDA's point of view, in the last little over a year, with 11,000 messages to the Hill, to letting folks to please tell them to make, and that was just like us a year and a half, and we've been doing this for a while. That
Hmm.
sort of thing. We had over 150 meetings with members of Congress to get this over the finish line. The campaign that we ran with both Mindy and Madison had over 3 million views and shares, countless press hits about that. It really was a full. You got to do all the above. It really was a full surround of a campaign that allowed it to
Hmm.
happen. But it built. I mean, built on it. I mean, MDA started doing this in 2019, building up to this building up to the moment. So it took years and years and years. I think what set us apart was just the messages and the stories people told, to get this over the finish line. And I know many of your viewers must have participated, and for that, just we're eternally grateful for sure. But yeah, it's a multi-pronged effort for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely advocacy takes a long time, but
Hmm.
yeah, I think this is a great example of what happens when advocates really push for these types of policies. So yeah, now I guess just to kind of wrap up our conversation, um, so I know you mentioned wheelchair spots, and for me,
Hmm.
that is obviously a huge thing that would make it so like I mentioned, I haven't traveled in a couple of years now, and just from my perspective, I think wheelchair spots would be a huge step in the right direction and would just allow a lot more people to travel by air. So I wanted to know if you could talk a little bit about um, the steps that are being moved towards that, I guess, ultimate goal of just making
Yeah.
sure people can just stay in their wheelchairs on the craft just like they can on the bus or any other form of transportation. How much farther do we need to go to get to that spot?
It's a good question, and there's no doubt it's the ultimate goal. I mean, it's the holy grail. We will not stop fighting until folks can just lock into that aircraft and
Mm-hmm.
flight. I mean, we're not done yet until that happens. And so the good news is this: we are moving forward. So I we are moving forward with this. Now, is it going to happen tomorrow? No. Is it as quick as people want it to be? I'm the first to admit, no. But we are moving forward with
Mm-hmm.
this. So. Um, just the kind of thing that's been going on with that. So there are some studies that have to be done to ensure safety. So they did a couple years ago. They did some crashworthiness testing. They did some testing on can a power wheelchair fit in a plane.
Mm-hmm.
And they did one on to kind of break the floor of the plane, which I found kind of amusing. I'm not quite sure, but they did that, and it passed fine. So there's a few more that have to be done. There's
Okay.
a couple more crash testing that have to be done, and ironically, there has to be an economic feasibility study in the sense of what would be the demand for this.
Mm-hmm.
So that those are kind of the final things that have to be done. But what happened in FAA authorization, which I think is really a positive step forward, is for the first time, it told DOT to give us it mandated them to give us a pathway towards this. So
Okay.
I checked actually before we hopped on. So a year from enactment of this FAA authorization,
Mm-hmm.
DOT needs to present um, a concrete pathway
Okay.
to get us to wheelchair spots on planes. And we need to see that in a year. And that I get it. That seems kind of bureaucratic. That might seem like what's that mean? But that's a positive step forward. So hopefully, if I chat with you in a year from now, I'll have more of a timeline about when that's going to be. There has to be a few more studies that still have to be done, as I said
Okay.
before. But I'm really, really hopeful that this is going to happen much sooner. It's going to happen uh, as quickly as it can. I know I'm not gonna lie to your viewers. It's not gonna happen tomorrow. It's not gonna happen, next year. But I do think if we come back again a year from now, we'll see what that mandated pathway says. We'll have more of a timeline about it because we know it has to happen. And it's what's interesting is you're starting to see. I won't say who they are, but you can Google it. There's some airlines who have been rolling out some of their own um, products about this and about to what would they might do, and that's all about momentum. So a few years ago we didn't see anything, and now there's at least some airlines who are starting to roll out what their own products about allowing folks to stay in their wheelchairs and planes, and that is momentum.
Yeah.
So it's big in the fact that Congress mandated DOT to come out with a concrete pathway, like told me you must do this, and so we'll
Mm-hmm.
see that in a year, and we'll see what that pathway is. You know, I can't give you 4 or 5 years. I'm not sure, but what I'd say to you is this: I a year ago I was the most optimistic I had been about improving air travel for people living with disabilities, including wheelchair spots on plane. The optimism has only grown.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope we can chat again in a year from now and see how the implementation of this has gone, and we can give you more concrete. But we are absolutely headed forward in that.
So now we'll get to my last question. It's just kind of along the same vein of just what other improvements are happening. So I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but single aisle aircrafts now have to have um, wheelchair accessible lavatories per DOT regulation, and then I think there's a couple of other regulations that are happening at DOT. I remember submitting public comment for
Yeah,
that as well. Can you just talk a little bit about some of those changes as well that are happening,
yeah.
not
There's a
through
lot.
Congress, but yeah.
There's a lot, and forgive me if I miss some across some because a lot of things that were an FAA authorization DOT wants to do as well. So it's kind of like getting at it from both directions. So the single aisle aircraft lavatory, yeah, they have to have an accessible lavatory. I believe it's in 10 to 12 years from last year. And that might seem a lot, and I know it is. But what I would say is the original proposal was like something like 20 plus years,
Yeah.
and they got that down to around 10. So single aisle aircraft are the most common ones that most people fly on. So that is something we'll see, you know, within 10 some years. The Department of Transportation just also released a rule that I'm going to call it a companion to what FAA reauthorization, so specifically with wheelchair users on planes. It mandated that following the single aisle aircraft lavatory, that those with two aisles as well have to kind of match that because they weren't in sync. They got them in sync. Um,
Hmm.
Better training as well. Better training, more information about aircraft cargo hold sizes. It actually will go into, how long, if you request service uh, to get on off the plane, how long is it reasonable for you to have to wait for staff to escort you on and off the plane? Many folks wait there for, unfortunately, quite a long time. It will mandate it will say how long is acceptable. So that is very good as well. So it's a companion to FAA reauthorization is how I would say it is. So that is coming. Those comments or probably might be due after this airs, which is fine. But it'll be finalized pretty soon, and so we'll have to wait and see what the final rule is, because we're pushing for some additional things. I'm sure the
Mhm.
industry is pushing for some additional things. So we'll have to see what DOT comes out as the final rule, because it can change between now and then. But it would, taken together, really improve this. It would improve currently the experience that folks who use wheelchairs fly on planes. So there's quite a lot, and with things to come, what's passed in Congress, a lot of that goes through the Department of Transportation to implement.
Okay.
So training, that sort of thing, evacuation standards, all that sort of
Mhm.
thing, that will involve public comment, and that will also might involve even more, more focused comment from the disability community. So there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot that the folks can take action on and get involved with even after these things have passed, because there's lots of opportunities for folks to get involved. So, if you want more involvement, you can go to, mda.org/advocacy, join us, and we'll ensure that those latest things. But your voice is always needed. Even after a big bill passes,
Mhm.
it's still needed because we got to implement it, and a lot of things will be implemented over the next 3 or 4 years that will need input from the community.
Well, that was all of the questions I had. Thank you so much for sharing this obviously great accomplishment, heading toward in the right direction,
Yes.
for more accessible air travel. So yeah, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me, Samuka. And I just want to give a big thanks to you and every advocate out there who has continued to raise their voices. Um, there's no doubt we're making progress because of you. There's no doubt in my mind. So keep it up. This victory is a giant step forward, and that giant step forward happened because of you and your listeners. So we can't do this without you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And let's accomplish more together. We have more to
Yeah,
do, and I think we can
for
do it.
sure.
So thank you for having me.